Last week, we heard that renunciation of desire and everything that is done with desire, that alone leads to the attainment of moksha. It begins with discrimination. Discrimination leads to knowledge of the unreal nature of things, to be precise. That knowledge leads to detachment of the mind from those things. Detachment leads to renunciation of all worldly activities. And finally, renunciation matures into perfect desirelessness, where even the will to enjoy is absent. And desirelessness brings peace immediately. So, discrimination leads to knowledge of the unreality of things. Knowledge leads to detachment, detachment to renunciation, and renunciation to desirelessness. And after desirelessness, we have immediate peace. And being rooted in that state of perfect peace, Shankaracharya says, being anchored in that state, the yogi should rescue one's own soul. Today he will explain how inquiry into the real nature of things, real nature of the Atman, Atmavichara, how Atmavichara is the only way to moksha. That will be our theme for today. Chittasya shuddhaye karma natu vastupalabdhaye vastu siddhir vicharena nakinchit karma kotibhi. I repeat. Chittasya shuddhaye karma natu vastupalabdhaye vastu siddhir vicharena nakinchit karma kotibhi. That means work is meant for the purification of the mind. But work will not bring perception of the reality. The reality is attained through discrimination and not in the least by 10 million acts. Now, karma refers to all the varieties of works that are prescribed by the karma kanda of the Vedas. There are 4 kinds of karma: nitya karma, naimittika karma, kamya karma, and finally nishiddha karma. First, nitya karma. Nitya karmas are obligatory works. For example, daily worship, devotions. But it also includes duties like feeding animals, showing hospitality to guests. Every householder is bound to perform this nitya karma every day as a matter of duty. Performing them doesn't produce any special merit, but not performing them produces demerit. Performing nitya karmas doesn't bring us any merit, but their non-performance produces demerit. That is nitya karma. Second, naimittika karmas, what we may call customary works. They should be performed on the occurrence of certain special events, say special worship that is performed when a child is born in the family. Things like that. The third is kamya karma, or works done for the fulfillment of certain specific desires. These are not optional. These are optional, but these are not mandatory. There is no rule that the householder has to perform kamya karmas. He may or may not. And the fourth is nishiddha karmas, or forbidden acts. That includes all immoral, evil deeds that are prohibited by the scriptures and also by society in general. So, nitya, naimittika, kamya and nishiddha. Daily works, obligatory works, customary, and works done for the fulfillment of certain specific desires, and finally forbidden actions. These are the four types of action. According to Sri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, acts of sacrifice, acts of charity and austerity, they must not be given up but should be performed. Because these actions purify the person who performs them without desiring any fruit. That means works of sacrifice, gift, austerity, yajna, dana, tapas, they should be performed even by a mumukshu, not just an ordinary householder, but also by a mumukshu, a seeker after freedom, but without attachment, without desire for the fruit, because otherwise they cause bondage. If I have desire, then I'll be bound. If I'm attached to the works and the desires, if I'm attached to the results of those desires. So, through such detached performance of nitya karmas, daily obligatory duties, an aspirant's heart becomes pure. Krishna says it is possible to perform these actions without any attachment. It is possible, just as a matter of duty, as I said, just because they ought to be done, because they have been prescribed by the Vedas, and the Vedas have good reasons for that. So, when an aspirant performs one's duties in this manner, selflessly, it gradually removes impurities of the heart. Then, as a result of this purity, one comes to feel, naturally, one comes to feel the presence of the Atman within. One comes to know intuitively that the Atman is something different from the body, that it is something distinctly spiritual. And gradually, as this awareness grows stronger and clearer, the aspirant is able to renounce all actions and becomes devoted to self-knowledge. Actually, this is the purpose of karma yoga, the attainment of freedom from karma to naishkarmya. Sri Ramakrishna says, it is by no means necessary for a person always to be engaged in one's duties. Action drops away by itself when one realizes God, just as the flower drops of itself when the fruit appears. He illustrates it beautifully. There is gold buried in your heart, but you are not aware of it. It is covered with a thin layer of dirt. Once you are aware of it, all these activities of yours will lessen. Then he gives the analogy of the daughter-in-law. When the daughter-in-law is with child, when she is carrying, her mother-in-law gives her less work to do. As time goes by, she is given less and less work. When the time of delivery nears, she is not allowed to do any work at all, for fear that it should hurt the child or cause difficulty at the time of birth. And after the birth of the child, the daughter-in-law busies herself with the baby alone. Everything she does is for the child. Shankaracharya also describes 4 stages through which a selfless person ultimately attains peace. First comes purity of heart. That is followed by the gaining of knowledge. Then comes renunciation of action. And finally, devotion to knowledge. It's a technical word. That means being a state of being established in knowledge. So, purity, knowledge, renunciation as the result of knowledge, and being established in knowledge. We can see how similar their descriptions are, Sri Ramakrishna's and Shankaracharya's. But as we heard last week, as a teacher of Advaita Vedanta, Shankaracharya is a staunch upholder of the Jnana Marga. He insists that the seeker after moksha should completely renounce all works mentioned in the Karma Kanda. Not just desire for the fruits of karma, but even the karma itself. According to him, karma and jnana are as incompatible with one another as darkness and light. Because karma implies an awareness or an acceptance of multiplicity, while the aim of knowledge is to see only unity. They are opposed to one another in Shankaracharya's view. So, work forms the discipline of karma yogis. They purify their hearts through selfless work and become ready for jnana. But this performance of work, that does not apply to sannyasis, because they follow jnana marga. Sannyasis renounce all karmas, religious rites, ceremonies, philanthropic works, everything that has secular motives, because they are all based on the idea of multiplicity, and mostly they are induced by desire. If this is not done, if the karma itself is not given up, Shankaracharya says there is no hope of freeing oneself from bondage to samsara. But let's not misunderstand him. He is neither criticizing the performance of karmas nor minimizing the importance of karma yoga as a spiritual discipline. He is only pointing out the relative roles of karma and jnana in higher spiritual development. Please remember that. Both are necessary. Both have their respective places. All that Shankaracharya is saying is, karma cannot directly lead to the perception of reality, which he calls vastu upalabdhi. Vastu means any really existing substance. Here it means the one and only real substance which has no second, that is to say, Brahman. By purifying the mind, by bringing about chitta shuddhi, karma is only an external, an indirect means to jnana. Then what is the direct means? Shankaracharya says, vichara, inquiry, investigation, reflection, inquiring into the true nature of the Atman, investigating into the real meaning of the Guru's instructions about the nature of Atman, reflecting deeply on the words of the scriptures. So, vichara means inquiry, investigation, reflection. After sufficient reflection, with the help of proper reasoning, of course, The aspirant next devotes oneself to meditation on Brahman. And in the depths of meditation, reality is perceived. What all takes place during the process of meditation and in what sequence, that we will have opportunity to discuss later on. For now, it is enough to know this much. According to Shankaracharya, an unillumined sadhaka, an unillumined spiritual seeker follows karma yoga. That is to say, they perform their duties without attachment, without desiring any results from their performance. So as a result of karma yoga, one gradually frees oneself from egotism, desire, passion. That is the result. And as the heart becomes purer and purer, one takes less and less interest in outside activities and pays more and more attention to contemplation and meditation. All these things should happen naturally. And they will happen naturally, provided it is all practiced without desire. One's attention is diverted from the outer life to the inner life naturally, spontaneously. Gradually, outer activities are reduced to the bare maintenance of the body, and the entire mind is devoted to contemplation of the Atman, one's own true self. Through that intense spiritual practice, contemplation, the heart becomes entirely pure. And such purity of heart is instantaneously followed by the attainment of knowledge. So this is how it all happens. In this way, Karma Yoga plays an indirect but a very vital role in the realization of jnana. So, nowhere does Shankaracharya show contempt for Karma Yoga. He knows the value of action in the unfoldment of spiritual life. And he does recommend Karma Yoga for beginners. But the beginning stages have to be outgrown as soon as possible. If there is sufficient mumukshutva, this longing for liberation, these things happen very quickly. Then the capacity for higher and higher forms of spiritual practice has to be developed. The goal is to realize unity. The unity that underlies all this diversity. So, sooner or later, karmas have to be transcended and jnana has to be cultivated through vichara. This is what the verse implies. Chittasya shuddhaye karma natu vastupalabdhaye vastu siddhir vicharena na kinchit karma kotibhi. Work is meant for the purification of the mind, but it will not bring perception of the reality. The reality is attained through discrimination and not in the least by 10 million acts. After pointing out this fact, Shankaracharya reinforces the idea that the only way of knowing a thing as it really is proper investigation. Samyak vicharata siddha rajju tattvavadharana bhrantodita mahasarpa bhaya dukkha vinashini. Samyak vicharata siddha rajju tattvavadharana bhrantodita mahasarpa bhaya dukkha vinashini. By proper reasoning, the ascertainment of the reality of the rope is gained. which puts an end to the great fear and grief caused by the deluded belief that it is a snake. I'll repeat it slowly. By proper reasoning, the reality about the rope is ascertained. That puts an end to the fear and grief caused by the mistaken belief that the rope is a snake. Very simply said, correct discernment reveals the true nature of a rope, and it removes the fear caused by the deluded belief that it is a snake. That's all. Here we find Shankaracharya using the well-known rope-snake analogy of classical Vedanta. Because of ignorance, a rope appears to be a snake. And it continues to be perceived as a snake as long as the ignorance lasts. But when the true nature of the rope is seen, the idea of the snake vanishes. So the question is, how to get rid of the ignorance that is the cause of misperception. Ignorance can only be removed by knowledge, by nothing else. So how to get that knowledge? The verse says, by properly examining the object or situation. In the semi-darkness, I see something lying on the ground and I mistake it for a snake and I'm terrified. If it were totally dark, I wouldn't have seen anything at all and probably I wouldn't have been afraid. And if it were fully light, I would have seen the object for what it is and wouldn't have been afraid either. But it is half dark and I don't see properly. It is an ideal condition for my mind to play tricks on me. I see something, but I don't know what it is. At that point, the idea of a snake that is already in my head, the idea of a snake takes over and makes me actually see the snake, and I become terrified. So this error in my perception, bhranti, delusion, ignorance, and the result is bhaya, dukkha, fear and grief. None of this has anything to do with the reality of the situation. My fear and suffering are caused by my own perception, my own ignorance. Bhrantyodita bhaya dukkha. So, in order to get rid of the fear and suffering, I only have to properly examine the situation. With what? With the help of a lamp. I only have to ascertain what the object is. Making a noise will not drive this snake away. A snake charmer can't help me. Not even beating the snake in the darkness will kill it. Because there is no snake in the first place. The snake is only a product of my own imagination, of my own ignorance. And the only antidote to ignorance is knowledge. So what I need is light. Simple. When I bring in the light, the snake will automatically disappear. But until this is done, I will continue to be afraid and my suffering will not end. Even if the snake is unreal, the fear and suffering that it causes are quite real. That is our situation. Now, if I am lucky, it may so happen that some good friends might come by and try to help me. They might tell me that the object is not a snake but just a harmless piece of rope. If they are trustworthy, and more importantly, if I have faith in them, I may even accept their words tentatively, hesitantly. Still, I won't be totally convinced of their words. I won't be able to completely get rid of fear and suffering unless I myself properly examine the object and see for myself that it is just a piece of rope. This thorough examination is what Samyak Vichara means. It involves much reasoning, of course, much deliberation, reflection. This is what will bring me the light of knowledge. Only Samyak Vichara can lead to certain or definite knowledge of a thing. Or, as this verse says, produce in the mind conviction about the reality of a thing. Tattva avadharana. Tattva avadharana means ascertainment of, conviction about the reality of a thing. So, sure knowledge or a firm conviction is the light that I need to get rid of my fear. And that comes as a result of proper investigation into the real nature of the thing that is causing me fear. The imaginary snake is the cause of my fear. What I need to get over this groundless fear is the definite knowledge, a conviction, firm conviction that it is not a snake but a rope. So, only a thorough examination of the object can produce that degree of certitude, conviction. It's not enough for my friends to say that it is not a snake but a rope. I must be convinced of it, beyond doubt. Only that and nothing else can remove my doubt. But once I see the rope, as it is impossible for me to be afraid of a snake or to suffer from snake bite. Once a person realizes that this samsara, which gives one so much anxiety and misery, is only an appearance caused by one's own ignorance, and that it is in reality nothing but Brahman itself, then there is no more fear or grief for that person. As Sri Ramakrishna said, the aspirant, while practicing spiritual discipline, looks upon the world as a framework of illusion. He keeps negating it, saying neti, neti, neti. He is afraid of the world. But after that attainment of knowledge, after having the vision of God, this very world becomes to them a mansion of mirth, a place of great fun. Now, before we move on, let us once follow the chain link by link. The root of all mischief is ignorance, ajnana. Ignorance gives rise to delusion, bhranti. Bhranti results in fear and grief, bhaya, dukkha. Then, proper investigation, samyak vichara, leads to right knowledge and conviction about the nature of reality, tattvavadharana. And that realization destroys fear and grief, bhaya, dukkha, vinasha. Ignorance, delusion. From delusion comes grief. Then, on proper investigation, we are led to right knowledge. When we are convinced, that conviction destroys fear and grief. See how appropriate, passant, this rope snake analogy is to our situation. So, samyak vicharata siddha rajjutatvavadharana bhrantodita mahasarpa bhaya dukkha vinashini. By proper reasoning, the ascertainment of the reality of the rope is gained. That puts an end to the fear and grief caused by the delusion that the rope is a snake. In the next verse also, Shankaracharya continues with the idea. He says, Arthasya nishchayo drishto vicharena hitoktitah na snanena na danena pranayama shatena va. Arthasya nishchayo drishto vicharena hitoktitah na snanena na danena pranayama shatena va. The ascertainment of the truth is gained from reasoning upon the words of the wise, and not by bathing in sacred waters, nor by making gifts, or by 100 pranayamas. In the previous verse it said, proper reasoning, samyak vichara, leads to firm conviction about the nature of reality. Tattvavadharana. Samyak vichara leads to tattvavadharana. And in this verse it says, definite knowledge, certain knowledge of reality. Arthasya nishchaya. Artha is the synonym of vastu of the previous verse. Arthasya nishchaya, that is gained through reasoning, vichara. The word artha means anything or object. Here it stands for reality or truth. The terms tattva, artha, reality, truth, they are all synonymous and interchangeable. So are the words avadharana and nishchaya. Both mean certitude, conviction, Gewissheit, Überzeugung. So both verses are saying the same thing. Conviction is gained through reasoning. The previous verse qualified reasoning, not just any kind of reasoning, but proper reasoning. But it doesn't define what proper is. What is proper reasoning? The definition comes in this verse. Reasoning on the words of the wise, hitoktitah vicharena. I just said if I'm lucky, it may so happen that some good, trustworthy friends might come by and try to help me by telling me that the object is not a snake but just a harmless piece of rope. They know what they're talking about. And this is important. Not only they know, but as human beings, they are pure, selfless, compassionate people whose only motive is to help me. They are my genuine well-wishers. But they don't demand unquestioning belief from me. On the contrary, they encourage me to analyze their words and leave me free to act according to my judgment. That is how broad-hearted these people are. They are called hitas, well-wishers. Krishna is an example of that. After giving the whole teaching of the Bhagavad Gita, we find Krishna telling Arjuna, I have declared to you the profoundest of all mysteries, and I have told you what is good for you. Reflect upon it fully and act as you will. Great words. I have declared to you the profoundest of all mysteries, and I have told you what is for your good. Reflect upon it fully and act as you will. The Shastras, the Guru, they serve the purpose of telling me what I should do and what I should not. But it is entirely up to me to choose the right and reject the wrong. So, if I have any spiritual worth in me, I'll be able to accept their teachings as true with a positive attitude of mind. I'll give the words my mind and reflect upon those teachings. So there is an element of faith in my reasoning. This is what is called proper reasoning. Hitoktita vichara, reflecting on good advice. Not just independent reasoning, but reasoning that is consistent with the teachings of the Shastras and the Guru. The advantage in this method is that it has been tried, tested down the ages, and it has been found to be effective and safe. So, better safe than sorry. Why do Vedanta teachers insist on this? Because, as we saw in the last verse, I am ignorant. I am subject to delusion. I am terrified of the snake of samsara. In this condition, I am not in the right state of mind to begin inquiring on my own. So the Shastras and the Guru start me on it. Not only that, they see that in my delusion, I've lost my way. I've lost myself in the side roads, bylanes, Zeitengasse of religiosity, mistaking them for spirituality. I'm spending whole lifetimes bathing in holy waters, giving away in charity, practicing yoga, and so on. So it is as if they want to gather me up from there, from the side roads, and put me on the direct highway to moksha, the path of vichara, inquiry. But mind you, I'll repeat it again, they are not at all condemning religious practices. These practices all have their relative value, they all have their respective places in my spiritual development. But they are preliminaries meant for cleansing the heart. They are meant for preparing my heart for higher spiritual practices. They don't by themselves bring knowledge. They don't by themselves directly lead me to freedom. That is all what it means. At the same time, it must also be said that the Shastras and the Guru will not recommend me the difficult, the subtle method of analysis, inquiry, until I've reached the required degree of self-purification. Until my Guru sees that I am ready for Vichara Marga, he'll ask me to perform Karma Yoga. Religious practices of the primary level, for example, Karma Yoga, they may be given up only after the soul has attained sufficient spiritual maturity, after I have gathered some strength. Only when my soul has properly graduated from those levels. It is equally true that when higher levels have been reached, I must also have the confidence to leave behind lower forms of spiritual practice. It's equally true that I have to have the courage to take up higher, more advanced forms. I hope that puts everything in the right perspective. So, the gist of the verse is, after hearing the truth about the Atman from the Shastras and the Guru, one should constantly ponder over it, to the exclusion of all other activities. Gradually, that reflection deepens into meditation, and then in the depths of meditation, the truth stands revealed to one's inner consciousness. So, arthasya nishchayo drishto vicharena hitoktitah na snanena, na danena, pranayama shatena va. The ascertainment of the truth is gained from reasoning upon the words of the wise, and not from bathing in sacred waters, or by making gifts, or by 100 pranayamas. In the last 3 verses, the 11th to the 13th, Shankaracharya has spoken about vichara, enquiry. That is the chief means of attaining jnana, self-knowledge. Now he introduces the next important topic. What are the qualifications necessary for following that subtle path of enquiry? Who is fit for the vichara marga? Because adhikarinam ashaste phalasiddhir visheshatah upaya deshakaladya santyasmin sahakarinah. Adhikarinam phalasiddhir visheshatah upaya deshakaladya santyasmin sahakarinah. Because success here in vichara marga depends chiefly on the qualified aspirant. Time, place, and such other factors are only secondary aids. The success of any work depends on several different factors. Unless all of them come together and cooperate with one another, the work will not succeed, even if I do my very best. People, materials, environment, place, time, everything has to synchronize. This is true of all worldly undertakings. Not only worldly undertakings, these factors also play a very important role in religious functions, like Vedic rites and ceremonies, worship of gods and deities, and such things. In all of these, there are extremely strict rules, meticulous procedures to be followed meticulously, conditions to fulfill. Otherwise, these works don't produce the desired result. They may even produce adverse results, harmful results. Whatever it is. But even at first glance, we can see that these are all external factors. Secular activities have external goals, and naturally, their success also depends upon external factors. Here in this verse, Shankaracharya is contrasting worldly objectives with the spiritual aim of life. Spiritual life is almost entirely internal, subjective. Even if external factors do play a role there, they're only secondary. The main factor of success in spiritual life is the fitness of the aspirant. It's not uncommon to see that among a group of students practicing the same spiritual disciplines under the same teacher in the same ashram at the same time, reaching different levels of progress. So what makes the difference? Competence, individual competence. Many times we see aspirants with the best opportunities for spiritual development wasting them, being unable to make use of them. They are placed in the best conditions of time and place, but still. On the other hand, we also see aspirants making steady progress under difficult, adverse conditions, making the best use of whatever little advantage they have. As we heard the other day, the grace of God, the teachings of the Shastras, the guidance of the Guru, they're all waiting to help me. But if I don't have the grace of my own mind, even the combined grace of all the other three becomes powerless. This is all the more true of Vichara Marga, because this path of self-enquiry is extremely subtle, very difficult. There's a nice story in the Chandogya Upanishad that illustrates the point. I won't be telling you the story in full, but the essence is the king of the gods and the king of the demons both went to the Creator God in the highest heaven to learn self-knowledge. But the king of the demons failed to grasp the teaching because his mind was impure. The place, the time, the teacher, they were the best. But the king of the demons was incompetent. So, success in this path demands an extremely high level of competence. And the qualifications are all internal. Discrimination, renunciation, self-discipline, longing for freedom. All these spiritual virtues are extremely hard to acquire. They cannot be had unless there is total commitment to spiritual life. There is a law of spiritual life. The fact is, whatever we take to be real affects our entire personality, our thoughts, emotions, actions. Our whole being responds to that reality. This is a law of spiritual life. So, if my mind is not convinced beyond a shadow of doubt that Brahman alone is real and the world is illusory, it will be impossible for my mind to commit itself entirely to the spiritual quest. That is why we are so slow in spiritual life. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say, God can't be realized if there is the slightest attachment to the things of the world. A thread cannot pass through the eye of a needle if the tiniest fiber sticks out. So it all depends on me, how pure I am, how intense my longing for moksha is. Everything else is secondary. That is what the verse is saying. Adhikarinam phalasiddhir visheshatah upaya deshakaladya santyasmin sahakarinah. Success in the Vichara Marga depends mainly on a qualified student. Time, place, and such other factors are only secondary aids. Now, before he moves on to describe the qualifications in detail, before he does that, Shankaracharya once again returns to the subject of practicing self-enquiry. Once again stresses the necessity of that. Practicing self-enquiry under the guidance of a spiritual teacher. Ato vichara kartavyo jignasor atmavastunah samasadya dayasindhum gurum brahmaviduttamam. Ato vichara kartavyo jignasor atmavastunah samasadya dayasindhum gurum brahmaviduttamam. Therefore, let the seeker after reality practice reasoning after approaching the Guru, who is a perfect knower of Brahman and an ocean of compassion. If you can remember, this is very similar to what is said in verse number 8. There we read, Ato vimuktyai prayateta vidvan sanyasta bahyartha sukha sprihassan santam mahantam samupetya deshikam tenopadishtartha samahitatma. Therefore, let the man of learning strive earnestly for liberation, renouncing all desire for pleasure from external objects. Let him humbly approach a noble, high-souled teacher and concentrate his whole soul on the truth taught by him. In verses 11 to 13, Shankaracharya has said that vichara, enquiry, is the chief means of attaining jnana. He is picking up the thread again. Ato vichara kartavyo. Because vichara is the means to jnana. It has to be practiced. By whom? Jignasoho, atmavastunaha, by one who desires to know the Atman. Just as one who desires moksha is called a mumukshu, one who desires to know the Atman is called a jignasu. One should desire to know the Atman because knowledge of the Atman removes ignorance. Not only ignorance, ignorance together with all its evil effects, delusion, fear, grief. But then, desiring to know alone is not enough. One has to learn the method of knowing. And that only the person who has himself known Brahman can teach. That is the whole point. Such a knower of Brahman is called a Brahmavid. But the verse says, Brahmavid Uttamaha, a perfect knower of Brahman. A perfect knower of Brahman is one who is firmly, unshakably established in the consciousness of Brahman. A sthita prajna, a person of steady wisdom. This is described in the Bhagavad Gita in the 2nd chapter. According to Shankaracharya, only such a perfect knower of Brahman can be a good guru. A guru is, by definition, one who drives out the darkness of ignorance and lights the lamp of self-knowledge in the disciple's heart. We know this from the Guru Stotra. But not only that, the Guru should be a Daya Sindhu, ocean of compassion. Most knowers of Brahman are carried away, swept off their feet by the sheer force of Brahman experience. They can't help it. But there are some rare, extraordinary souls who are able to withstand the effects of that experience and stay on in this mortal world of ours. Why? Their sole motive is of helping us out of our ignorance. Just look at their compassion. We can't begin to imagine the depth of their compassion. They are the Daya Sindhus, oceans of compassion. Shankaracharya says, Samasadhya, properly approaching such a great soul, that is, with humility, reverence, devotion, by serving them, by surrendering oneself to them, one should learn the method of Atmavichara, self-inquiry. Ato vichara kartavyo jignasor atmavastunaha samasadhya daya sindhum gurum brahmaviduttamam. Therefore, let the seeker after the reality of the Atman practice reasoning after approaching the Guru, who is a perfect knower of Brahman and an ocean of compassion. So much for today. We have come to the end of our time almost. So, thank you.